In February this year, President Jacob Zuma encouraged the National House of Traditional Leaders to take advantage of the Restitution of Land Rights Amendment Bill. For those who missed the deadline to lodge a claim, the new cutoff date had been extended to 2019. But it's created a number of political, cultural and economic dilemmas, as eNCA reporter Thulasizwe Simelane finds out.
In KwaQanqatho, near Babanango, northern KwaZulu-Natal, Msizeni Magwaza and his community have long lived on this land.
Singabokudabuka lapha lonje ungapha kwami umzala wami usibonelo wakamchunu ukhokho wakhe wayibambile esandlwana besuka eNcome besuka la bethunywe umbomboshe ukuthi bayolwa namabhunu le usho ukuthi ukhokho wakhe siyazalana lono umama welanywa ubaba wakhe lo mina ke ukhokho wami waye khona esandlwana umkhulu isilo sakwaNobamba uDinizulu sazi ngamehlo.
In the 1980s, they were forcibly removed when the farms were turned into plantations for paper mills. Those that stayed worked for white farmers in return for living on the land and keeping their cattle. They lodged a restitution claim in 1998. Government tells them it is still in the research phase. Their hope for restitution has not only been dampened by administrative delays. There are also other powerful players with an interest in this land. Ingonyama Trust, the Provincial Heritage Conservation Agency, and the Ingonyama Trust, which is aligned with King Goodwill Zwelithini.
Ngokwazi kwethu ise on kodwa abantu bakwa Land Affairs noma bakwa Rural Development sekunesikhashana sibagcinile ukuthi besitshela ukuthi kuqhubekani ngeclaim yethu abagcine bekusho bathe amafa awafuni ukubadayisela umhlaba imali khona.
The Ingonyama Trust bought the land from its previous owners, fencing off a portion of the farm to create a game reserve. This prevented the KwaQanqatho community grazing their livestock and accessing the main water source. Disaster followed.
Lapha ngithi nje ungabona amathambo agcwele intaba la. Kwathiwa ke lesi sifo siqhamuka kulezi nyamazana. Yizo ubona odokotela bayazi thina sazi lutho sazi ukusebenza la emaplazini. Odokotela bathi ke ukukufa kuqhamuka enyamazaneni nakho ukuphunza kwembuzi nazi inkomo. Yikho ke lokho nakho lokho sasikhala kubo abama. Ukuthi cha bobo siyemuva thina. Siyalahlekelwa thina. Asisalimi imfuyo futhi esiphila ngayo asisakhona ukuphila ngayo iyafa. Kube khona abaqhamuka abakhulume bona abahloniphekayo bathi sisazoqhubeka sizale inyamazana.
While the KwaQanqatho land claim remains unresolved, local reports suggest that King Goodwill Zwelithini wishes to build a new palace on the land, his eighth.
Akuzwakali kahle akwehli futhi hayi ngoba sizonda indlunkulu sithanda impela indlunkulu thina esifuna kucace lo mhlaba sazi ukuthi amafa akahulumeni athola isabelo mali kuhulumeni manje isikhathi eside thina sazi ukuthi sikhuluma namafa kahulumeni ukuthi ke manje umhlaba usungaphansi kweNgonyama Trust nalokho kusenza ukuthi ngempela siyacela nokuthi uadvocate Thulimadonsela akeke ngenelele kulento eke fike emthanjeni wayo sithole ingonyuluka yakhona ukuthi kanti kwenzeke kani.
The Ingonyama Trust administers around 2.8 million hectares on behalf of communities in KwaZulu-Natal. It's preparing a multi-billion rand land claim which will cover land taken from 1838 onwards. In some instances, this massive claim overlaps with land already claimed by other communities and clans, including the people of KwaQanqathu. This community is now at the point of despair.
The position is that they would file a claim in the name of the Zulu nation because land was taken from traditional leadership. A detailed research will have to be done so that we don't claim that which does not belong to us.
The Ingonyama Trust's ambitious plans have been encouraged by promises made by politicians.
I think those who are claiming should find good lawyers.
But there is one crucial obstacle: the existing law. The amendment to the 1994 Restitution of Land Rights Act, signed into law this year, may have extended the deadline for new claims for another 5 years, but it does not make provisions for land lost prior to 1913.
Confusion came directly from the president.
This is not a small matter. It's a matter that, in my view, you could put together your resources to look at this law, to look at the claims on behalf of your people.
The president has been saying to the Khoisan, you'll be able to claim. He's been saying to the houses of traditional leaders, get your lawyers, put in your claims. He's implied that the 1913 cutoff date has been changed. But the law did not change it, and the law could have changed it, because the Constitution gives a base of rights, but government can always do better than that. So they could have gone further back in time, and they didn't. They chose not to, actually for very good reasons, because when you go further back in time, how do you sort out all the overlapping rights that different people occupied the land at different times?
If you have a land right or a dispossession that happened before 1913, the Act does not allow us as a Commission on Restitution of Land Right to deal with that. However, I know that the Minister of Rural Development is engaging various parties, especially the Khoi and the San communities, for us to begin to engage on the question of how do we deal with historic landmarks, heritage sites, the Khoi and the San.
The purpose of the exceptions is to actually augment that law to ensure that we're not confined to the restitution law, but rather we create a program over time which will consider the Khoi and the San, because they were dispossessed long time ago.
But one of the main issues is whether people in rural areas who fall under traditional authorities benefit from land restitution. In rural South Africa, the economy depends on who controls the land and the cultivation of subsistence and small-scale farms. But this may be at odds with the interests of chiefs who administer the so-called traditional land and the people living in these areas, many of whom prefer cooperative arrangements independent of Amakhosi. The KwaQanqathu claimants attended a workshop where communities were given a platform to voice their concerns about the conflict between their need to live on and work the land with the demands of Amakhosi.
Kunodaba luphume kwi-mature ukuthi isilo sesizowakha eplazini elinama-claims, and isilo futhi last year abafowabo bakubeka kwacaca ukuthi isona kuphela esinegunya lokuclaima lo mhlaba kwasemakhosini. Thina funeka siyofunela indawo kwenye indawo, futhi singabantu bokufika la asazi ukuba kusho phezu kwamaphi ama-grounds,
ngoba enabantu ngempela bayaxhashazwa. Mina lapha mina nje khona induna edingisa abantu ukuthi leli komiti ke lifike abantu baziphumele eshashalazini babike ngeindaba zabo, abathathu nje badilizile bahamba.
Customary law formulated under colonialism and strengthened under apartheid was used as a means of indirect rule. Some feel that this has yet to change.
lapho kwakhe khona imayini ilapho esasilima khona nje amasima sekhaya sasilima khona singcwabe khona ama-grave awu-11 kuleyo ndawo awakhipha imayini amathuna awamuva ayisa kwenye indawo manje-na-ke uma ngabe sekulokhu zileke uma ngabe seyakhileke sesifaka ama-complain okuthi hawu kade silima la siphila la mayina wabo sasinaka na ithi mayini hambani ebukhosini uma ngabe sithi siyaya ebukhosini ithi ubukhosi thina sinayo indawo eyenkosi so asinalo ilungelo lokuthi siclaim ngamasimo ekade siphila kuwona.
Basically what's happening is chiefs are feeling threatened by the fact that some people have independent ownership, because if you're an independent owner you can't be threatened with eviction. So they have now come up with an idea that the only form of ownership that's appropriate in the form of Bantustans is tribal ownership. And the irony is that that is the very idea used by the colonialists when they dispossessed African land. They said these systems don't constitute property rights for their members, and therefore this land is free for the taking. Again, now, 100 years later, 200 years later, the state is saying customary law doesn't constitute property rights for the making, this doesn't constitute property rights for the members, this land is free for the taking by chiefs and by the state.
The chief does not own land. The chief is only a custodian over the land on behalf of the people. So it can be, therefore, that it is a chief that actually benefits. Traditional, I'm talking traditional, that benefits at the expense of the people. It cannot be. It doesn't work that way in tradition. So we want to make sure that we are clear about that, so that it is a community that benefits from the land. And the chief, as part of the community, will benefit from the land. And if he is legitimate or she is legitimate, there's no reason why the chief should fear his or her people.
Within traditional political structures of KwaZulu-Natal, ordinary people are subjects of the Amakhosi, and every Inkosi is a subject of the king. The king therefore controls the land, and the Amakhosi are its custodians.
We moved from what in Zulu, what we often hear people say, Inkosi, Inkosi ngabantu, to a situation where today, I think one can safely say Inkosi, Inkosi ngahulumeni. Chief is a chief by the government. And if you look at the law, the appointment of Makhosi is done by the state. And so it becomes questionable whose interests Amakhosi serve.
Uyabona yikho indawo enentando yeningi njengeendawo zamakhosi. Ake ngenze nje isibonelo. Uma uya emikhandluni yamakhosi lo kuthiwa ama-traditional councils, akhethwa ngentando yeningi kuze kube khona u-60% oqokwa inkosi, kube khona u-40% okhethwa abantu democratic. So akukho la besuke becindezeleke khona. Ayikho indawo ekhululeke nevulele abantu njengendawo yasemakhaya. Kuyaxoxwa kube nezivumelwano, Ingonyama Trust iqhamuke ngoba yiyo ekuyiyo esingethe emanage umhlaba on behalf of amakhosi. Kube yiyo ebuka zonke izinto, bathintwa abantu babe ingxenye. Akwazi ukuthi kuthiwe amakhosi akukho la ozwila yakhe nje.
These contradictory understandings between government, the chiefs and the people about who owns the land affect the management of its use.
The problem is that you have traditional councils and traditional institutions that are busy delegitimizing themselves by getting involved in business and getting big share of business, people going to them. Instead of them, when somebody gets to them and say, I want to run business here, I want to explore mining, I want forestry, instead of calling the people and saying to the people, this is what you have, what is your decision, have you got the structure, organize people accordingly, so that people can benefit.
In addition to these political problems faced by the people of KwaQanqatho and structures like the Ingonyama Trust, the entire land restitution process faces additional administrative and logistical challenges. The Department of Rural Development estimates the cost would be almost 180 billion rand over 15 years. And that's excluding land claims founded in earlier centuries.
The process of taking the land from the indigenous people took centuries, took different forms, and finally ended with the huge majority of the indigenous people with no land. It took wars, it took laws, many things. But when we're supposed to address this matter, we're only given few years to deal with it. And we felt it was unfair.
We acknowledge that it's going to be an expense to the states, but I believe that it's an expense that is necessary because the consequences of ignoring the plight of the most vulnerable of our society is one that we can ill afford.
When we deal with land, we must know we're not dealing with money. We're dealing with human lives. We're dealing with people with emotions, with aspirations.
The reopening of the land restitution process has also paved the way for what could perhaps be the most complicated and ambitious land claim conceivable in South Africa.
We are first indigenous people to this country, and that's why we are entitled. Everybody else came when we were here. Whoever came to this country came to us.
On the basis of this understanding, Khoisan organizations want to lodge a land claim that will cover a large chunk of South Africa. For them, it's not just a gesture of ownership, it's to re-establish a sense of belonging.
Griqua people are tied to their land via their birthrights, via spiritually. You can't separate the two, a Griqua person and his land. Sometimes we come here alone. When you just want to belong here in peace or with your soul or search your inner self. I drive up here, get the key, just come up here, you're alone. And relax. Just sit and listen to the wind blowing through the trees. It revives you. You know?
It revives you.
It does something to you. When you think and you just think about your people that lived here. This belongs to us. This is our history, it's our culture, our ancestral land. Our ancestors are not happy, I can tell you.
As the law stands, Ralph Reuters is still excluded from claiming his ancestors' land. Addressing his needs will complicate government's task of mediating between competing claimants. While some criticize land restitution as too complex and costly, it remains an essential part if South Africa is to restore dignity to all who live in it. This is not about money, it's about justice.
For more information on eNCA's Land Reform series, you can visit our website on the address that appears on your screen. You can also tune into special panel discussions on Tuesday evenings at 8 p.m, where experts will thresh out some of the key issues in the debate around South Africa's land reform process. I'm Thulasizwe Simelane, and thank you for watching.